Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Auxis Corporate Performance Series webinar, Navigating the Dynamics of Change.
Testing.
My name is Yazan Arroyo, and I'm the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is presented by Auxis. Auxis is a very different consulting and outsourcing firm comprised of former industry professionals who don't act like traditional consultants. Offering a customized, real-world, results-oriented approach, we become ingrained in our clients' culture and vision and truly dedicated to their success. Our depth of experience allows us to operate under a very different leverage model and maintain a focus on customization, flexibility, and bottom-line results at a very competitive cost structure. Before we begin, let me remind all participants, we welcome your questions. Please submit them in your webinar panel at any time. We'll address your questions at the conclusion of the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to our speaker, Michael. Michael?
Thank you, Yaslin. I appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation. I'll start going through. I'll start off with the agenda. Today's agenda, I'm going to go over my background, what exactly an Auxis Service Delivery Manager is and does. I'll briefly talk about the goals for navigating the dynamics of change. I'll talk about the various types of change. I'll talk about motivations for change, change tools, and then from there I'll move into case studies, some of the more prevalent case studies of what went right, and then we'll move on to the unfortunate parts of what went wrong in some case studies. We'll go through and we'll summarize the lessons learned, and then we'll move to a questions and answer session. Again, my name is Michael Fleener. I'm an Auxis Service Delivery Manager. I have been in technology for 20 plus years. 18 of those years I've been in technology leadership. I've had a very diverse background. I was very fortunate to start my career at a very large manufacturer, Motorola, which was the birth of Six Sigma in practice. I spent 13 years at a mid-sized market research conglomerate, which actually helped their clients through change processes by going through and actually giving recommendations and feedback on their products or market segments that they needed to enter, or giving them feedback for all kinds of things. Then I was very fortunate to spend a few years at a large insurance broker that change was deeply ingrained into their culture. And I'm very happy to say that I've been with Auxis for the past year and a half, and implementing a lot of the practices and procedures I've learned in my other organizations. I've utilized concepts of Six Sigma and IDLE 3 in my tenure. I've been responsible for hundreds of projects over my career, utilizing those concepts as well. I'm very active in the CIO Leadership Network in South Florida, and I'm always focused on the big three for IT, and that is innovation, risk mitigation, and near and dear to CFOs everywhere, cost controls. I get answered this question a lot from peers. Exactly what is a service delivery manager, and what do they do? Well, the concept was derived from IDLE 3, which is a tool we'll talk about later. But I'm the focal point for my clients and the ITO organization, Auxis's ITO organization, that provides IT outsourcing to organizations or IT services. I ensure service delivery. I ensure service level agreements are being met per our contract or arrangements or agreements with our customers. I'm a change manager for my clients, which again is right in line with this presentation. I also happen to be the problem manager for the organization as well, so I focus on that. For my clients specifically, some of them see me different. In addition to just being a service delivery manager, I play an executive role with budget responsibilities at a client. I'm also an advisor to CIO directors at other clients. The good thing about that is I'm able to see what's going right or what has happened in other industries across and apply those best practices to the different customers that I service, as well as get a larger feedback in our weekly and meetings with the other SDMs and the rest of Auxis management on the ITO side. I also provide quarterly service level reviews to the clients I'm responsible for, and I am the top level escalation point for our clients, for the clients that I deal with specifically. This is, it was interesting, navigating the dynamics of change. When we actually picked topics, I was thrilled to that I quickly put mine in. I knew what I wanted to do right away. I've given this presentation dozens of times in my career. There's no two versions of this presentation. Even since we did our practice ones, I've changed it dramatically. I love this presentation. I'm excited about the process. The concepts in this presentation and the process was relevant 500 years ago. It's relevant today, and it'll be relevant 500 years from now. I just can't say enough about when you go through, and there's words on a page you can read, but understanding the dynamics of change and being able to effectively get buy-in from everybody and get your organization ready for the change process can be one of the best processes you can master as an organization. If you can do these, if you can actually really master change, you're going to give your organization organizational strengths that your competitors may not have, like the ability to be very agile when it comes to markets or services or your clients, innovative. You can see this as a huge growth potential for your organization. I love the process. I start off by some quotes, and they're pretty relevant. Both of these quotes were taken from periods in our history with great change. One of them being social change, the election of our first African-American president, and the second one is from great geopolitical change during the height of the Cold War. I'll read them because they're very impactful. Barack Obama: change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. Again, very prevalent today, tomorrow, and in the future. And this has always held true for me. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. I believe that change is the law of life. Everything we do, our business today, when we analyze it, is certainly different than a year ago. We've seen dramatic changes and shifts in how people address infrastructure, people address security. You have to stay vigilant, and it's just part of what a great organization needs to foster. With that, I'll start talking about types of change. There's 4 book versions of change. I'm sure there's the variants on them, but the planned change is just a deliberate change. Let's say you're changing an address. And a lot of people don't think that could be meaningful, or changing a phone number. I can tell you that it's very meaningful, specifically if you have a shipping business, or you're changing a phone number for your catalog, and you have 3 years worth of catalogs out there with a different phone number. You could certainly impact your business, so you really have to think about these things. Unplanned change, and again, we talk about some of these types of change in our case studies a little bit later. But some of the unplanned changes are government regulations and changes in the economy, and the economy is very cyclical. Government can change and affect negatively and positively certain businesses. So you can have very positive unplanned changes, but more often than not, we talk about the very negative unplanned changes. Radical changes are more common than you may think. Leadership changing, coming in and actually taking the company in a new direction, or a fundamental system or structure change can be driven by a new ERP system, which is probably the largest change we see on a regular basis. Is fundamental infrastructure change that that is a hiccup. Organizationally, you've lost. You have to retrain your people, and we'll talk about that in the processes a little bit later. Transformational change is probably the biggest one. But unplanned and transformational changes are the ones that can affect companies probably the most negative way. Disruptive change in technology, like the invention of the internet, or how often was the last time we saw a Sears catalog? It was so big when I was a very small child. You know, there would be times where we'd order a bunch of clothes from the Sears catalog. It doesn't happen anymore. You're going to go on your iPhone or your Android device, and if you want to order something from anywhere, you can just do it. And if you're not could be the disruption of the fossil fuel environment. In 50 years, we may not have any fossil fuels. We're going to have to look at other alternatives to power our cars, our fuel systems, our electrical systems. Generally, they're rethink events. Something dramatically happened. I would imagine that the horse and buggy, the buggy whip maker, didn't have a very good decade when Henry Ford started producing his first cars in mass quantities. Those are the 4 generally accepted types of change. Motivation for change. There's a few typically generally accepted concepts here. All change is either driven from 2 ways. It's either internal or external forces. Sometimes it can be innovation to extend your market lead, or to shrink the gap between the company and your market leader. A lot of times you're playing catch up, or you want to enter a new market to capture more revenue. Other times it's risk avoidance. There's more prevalent today than any other time in history. I think we spend a lot more time in motivation for change for risk avoidance. I can talk about the security issues they had at Target, Home Depot. Great feats. Even some clients were asking about what can we do to be more PCI TTS compliant. What can we do to do this? And we steer them in the right direction. We actually go into that process with them. Another motivation for change is, again, near and dear to the CFO's hearts of the world, is cost savings. Anytime you can affect cost savings, you're going to put that money to the bottom line. Other is, I actually have a quasi-other in one of the case studies, and it's basically anything that doesn't meet the other ones that I've described, both the innovation, risk avoidance, and cost savings. Change tools. The change tools that I have used in my career and have been privy to, and have had the very good fortune of having some great leadership, being involved with some great leadership. They've used their leadership, their communication, and process to institute the change, and I'll go into that in a little further detail. But first, I would like to talk about 2 quotes. Both of them are extremely relevant. Both have to do with leadership, and both have to do with seismic shift in change. And I'll talk about this one. They're 2 of my favorite quotes. Management is doing the right things. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. It boils down to leadership picks the projects, management delivers, and also leadership has this quote from Henry Ford: "Don't find fault, find remedy." I've always found that really prevalent, because if leadership can actually push this down to say, don't worry about what doesn't work, worry about how to fix it and how to institute it long term. I find that very telling when a leader actually uses that methodology about let's fix it and institute the fix, and we'll get past the other obstacles. Change does start and end with leadership. There's in my opinion, and what I've seen to be true, is leadership is the main tool, and and the other two pieces, communication and process, are just a subset of leadership. Um, the higher up in the leadership driving the change, the more downward force will be applied. Now, no two changes are the same. You can have a mergers and acquisition that will affect every single part of the companies. So you might, if you're going to do a mergers and acquisition with a similar size or a smaller company, that other entity is going to go through a financial switch. They're going to go through a management switch. They're going to go through a communication switch. They might even go through product switches. Those are all rolled up into the main change that is the mergers and acquisition. So the higher up you can actually put your change, the more downward force will apply, and you'll be able to get things done like better communication. Again, these are things that I've seen, and I steadfastly believe that there is no such thing as over-communication. Again, communication is only relevant when it's timely. I like to keep. I like to see when communication is kept very succinct. It's very broad. Everybody can understand it to the widest audience possible. You get quicker buy-in. I'm a big fan of actually saying what you're going to do and doing what you're going to say. Working with you, if you work with me before, you'll know that I'm very repetitive in my message, specifically when it comes to a change. I'll say the thing over and over and over again, and over and over and over again. Again, I'm going to reference the Henry Ford quote: "Don't find fault, find remedy." Leadership, when they should. I've seen successful change stressed by leadership that it's all about getting the things done right, documenting them, and making sure that they're instituted long term. Every level must communicate to overcome resistance to change. That's one of the biggest detractors of change, and that is, gosh, I'm really concerned about this, and I don't know that it's going to work. Well, you need to go through and do some employee engagement. You need to elicit feedback. You need to take that feedback. You need to institute it. Sometimes something will come up from very high up that really doesn't make sense on the very lower ends or middle management pieces. There might be a great idea inside the boardroom or at the C level, but it's really not all that practical for some reasons that are not relevant or not really obvious to the C level executive. If we can actually get that feedback back in a timely fashion, you can salvage the change by making very key decisions or modifying the plan. Very, very important. I've seen this countless times, and as well as at least one of the case studies will show this, bear this to be true. Effectively communicate your goals. If you have a new ERP package or something, an HR change or something that needs to be doing, get it out there. Get it out there sooner than later. Make sure you can get some changes, but make sure that everybody is really aware of exactly what this change will do for your organization. If it's we are going to reduce cost because we want to keep, we want to stay competitive, and we want to keep your jobs, or we want to enter a new market so we can mitigate risk from shrinking margins in another environment. Those have to be communicated. I see that not communicated a lot. You really want to get buy-in, and it's really important. In a little while, you'll see. Again, just be very specific. Talk about what the scope involves. Is it a department? Is it a division? Is it the entire company? It's going to affect internal people, external partners, customers. It's really, really, really relevant for all of these things to know. I mean, I know there's somebody that's probably watching this webinar, and I'm going to steal a line from her. She would go through and say, "Does everybody know?" And that was her mantra, and made a big marketing campaign out of it, and I was pretty proud of that long term. So this is the result you're really trying to get by communicating everything effectively. You're going to hopefully get everybody into the Magic Quadrant, if you will, the top right. Ideal support, high awareness, high support. Talking about the other quadrants, I see the enthusiastic but naive. I call that the Apple consumers, of which I am happily an Apple consumer. We were talking about this the other day. If an iSock product came out, which I found out there is an iSock product coming out, that they would just buy it sight unseen. Great, but doesn't really help you. You're just super enthusiastic, but you don't really know much about it. You're just going to buy it anyway, or you're going to go do whatever the change is. The two bottom quadrants are the ones that are more concerning. If you're not, if they don't know about it and they're skeptical, you've not done your job in communication. Leadership is probably failed by some of the things that they want to institute. They got to use the tools, communication and their leadership, pushing it down on their subordinates. Then there's a solid awareness. Apparently, they understand it, but there might be some lack of trust. Maybe you've implemented something poorly in the past. Maybe it's counter, or the feedback hasn't got back to the right level of management. That yeah, we understand. It's just not going to work. So the communication needs to flow back up, so you can, and then have the plan modified, so you can get high awareness and high support. Really important to get to high awareness and high support, because if that happens, you can start using change, the next process. Kurt Lewin's three-step model. I guess Kurt Lewin thinks that we're unshapen blocks of ice. Anyway, I think that he is pretty right on the money on this. Whoops, let me go back one. Oh. He's right on the money on this. Once you get to the point where high acceptance and they're ready for change, by high acceptance, you've already mitigated the big detractors, which is you know, they're just not into change. They're skeptical, but you've got them to that point. You can go ahead and execute the change. And once the change has been executed, assuming everything goes well, or it doesn't go well, you're going to work through the process. Then you're going to go through and actually ensure that the change becomes permanent by using other tools. It's called the unfreeze, change, and refreeze. They want you to get to the point. They want you to they want to get out of what you used to do, actually make the change, and then once you've instituted it, go through and do your institutional transfer. Using concepts from IDLE, you're going to go through and actually do the documentation, the knowledge management, institutional knowledge transfer, the process and procedures, internal marketing, if you will, but also in beyond marketing, you're actually committing this stuff by standard operating procedures, by institutional knowledge transfer for different departments. It really solidifies that change long term. And then you can start going through and using. Now, this doesn't always apply to everything. I mean, IDLE 3 is for the technology department, but technology plays such a large role in everybody's organization nowadays. So these concepts do work in other areas of the business. I think they're great. That's what our business at Auxis is predicated on, is actually process and procedures. I'm very, very, very happy to be a part of it. This is a more in-depth model. John Cotter is spent 30 years researching this, and it's basically an expanded version of what we were able to do in the three-step model, of Kurt Lewin's three-step model, but it actually breaks it down even further. It goes through and starts, you start going through in bits and pieces. You increase somewhere at some level. Doesn't have to be the C level. It could be it could be a departmental change. So that department head's going to say, you know what, we need to change a process or procedure. They're going to go through and raise the urgency level. They're going to go and get consensus from the team or parts of the team. They're going to make sure that that vision is right. So this part is actually the reverse communication back of the initial change. This is step 3. You're making those on-the-fly changes to the change process or the process procedure. So there's two-way communication up and down the management leadership chain. You're going to go through and engage a little bit more part, and you're going to get some buy-in. You're going to go through and actually start empowering and get people excited about actually doing the change. You're going to go through and start taking short-term wins, like a subsection is doing this part, or it could be ERP's changes are a pretty good example for this particular process. And then you start looking at don't let up, which means you're going to finish your change and then make it stick by going through and actually putting process and procedures in place, which is about the only way you're going to make it live long term. I've seen that in my time at all the companies I've been a part of. The last piece of making it long-term is documenting your procedures and making sure that everybody's adhering to them. So but part of the process is the acceptance from the end users, is making it about what they're getting and not what they're giving up, and that's helps you get for the first few stages of this particular model. So I'd like to walk you through 5 case studies. Each case study is fairly relevant in some areas of change. I was very fortunate to be part of the first one, and a little bit part of the second one, but I'll talk about them in depth. And then I guess the Motorola switch to NT4 and Dell computer is the two examples. These are 2 examples of our widely successful changes. The Motorola switch to the NT4 and the Dell platform. Apple switched to Intel processor. They actually did 2 processor changes in the past 20 years, both huge, both wildly successful. And then the benefits of successful change. This is just a little chart. You have your current state, productivity and desired productivity dip, and a desired state. If you're really good at doing change, you're going to go from your current state to your desired state with little time in the productivity dip. It's really important because, just talking a few seconds about that, it's really important because if you really get good at change, you minimize your productivity dip, you minimize all kinds of other issues of running 2 systems at the same time. That's cost, that's opportunity. Let's say you're talking about implementing some change that actually gets you to a market. If you can get to that market sooner, you have a better chance in capturing more market share or stealing market share from your competitor. Whatever it is, if you're good at change and you're good at implementing it faster than your competitors, or just faster to save internal resources and costs, it's always better for you. This is this one I was very fortunate to take part of early in my career. I was in college at the time working for Motorola. The industry is telecommunications and electronics. It's a radical change, so there's it has to do with the systems. Motivation for change, innovation and risk avoidance. And the abstract is as complicated. I'm going to have to give you some examples because this is a long one, and this is I would have not believed this had I not been a part of it, but it really goes back to the communication. So Motorola and Apple were very good partners, and Motorola operated the largest Apple environment in the world for the better part of their existence until the mid to late 90s. At one time, Apple had actually licensed to select vendors the ability to clone their operating system and provide that on their own hardware, their own PCs, if you will, their own Mac clones, Apple clones. Apple being the strongest partner with Motorola, Motorola being the strongest partner with Apple, they immediately jumped on it. They were already building the microprocessors for them. There was a huge shift, great communication, very good communication. Everybody had already put their pre-order, and we'd already started manufacturing. Spent a couple $100 million to build a manufacturing facility in Texas, started rolling out these Apple clones. Then, for whatever reason, Apple decided that's not what they wanted to do, and they pulled the licenses away from everybody. Well, this was a catastrophic breakup in the relationship because Motorola had invested hundreds of millions of dollars building these plants, everything else. Every one of the 33,000 employees knew exactly every detail about this. It was on the bulletin boards, it was on our town halls. It was a constant thing. The build up to when we first got the ability to make them to the ability to where they took it away from us, and we felt wronged. The organization felt wronged. So it's ironic because we had actually planned on replacing all of the Apple equipment with our own stuff at a much lower cost, and we would have been the largest Apple clone manufacturer in the world. But this changed. We had to take a very large write-off for that business division, and we went through and quickly made the decision to go to Dell and NT4. And that happened in a very short time period. We ripped out pretty much every bit of Apple except in one small department, the legal department, and left the organization. And that is probably the tools that had to happen. Certainly leadership made the decisions. The communication was fantastic. Everybody knew about it. There was no need to get everybody to the top right corner. We'd all felt wronged. We had a massive change to do. It was very complex. We didn't care. We all pitched in. We all got it done at every level, from marketing to accounting to IT, everything, engineering. Didn't matter. We came together and we got it done. So that was the most unique one that I'd been a part of. But it shows you what can go, what can happen when one of your tools is spot on. Communication was overwhelmingly positive, and the mass move to a completely different platform. So the second one, ironically tied to the first one, again, Motorola is slightly involved in this because Motorola was part of the chip vendor with IBM building the PowerPC, but not really super relevant for this. They're in the telecommunications now. They weren't at the time, and they're in the electronics business. Their change type is radical as well. And this was all about innovations and risk avoidance. The abstract was basically switched to the microprocessor of Intel's microprocessor. They had been gated by the slowness and the inability for the research and development from IBM and Motorola's chip partnership. They were just getting outspent. They were just getting outspent in the chip wars. So they went ahead and made the decision, and this was a Herculean task because they had to go through and change communication and processes to their customers and to their developers. They had to rally the developers to completely rewrite code for a new chip, and they didn't have a lot of time to do it. This was at a time when Apple was Steve Jobs was back. They were still vulnerable. They weren't the colossal giant they are today. Their place in the world was not set. They had actually had a precedent of doing this when they moved away from the Motorola chips directly to a partnership of PowerPC. They had Steve, though I don't know if there's anybody ever like Steve Jobs will ever be. Again, his communication and his ability to turn people into adamant supporters when there's very adverse situations, but both of those times when they had chip changes, he was able to help out. And I think there's a phrase termed for it. It's called Apple's reality distortion field. So they made a massive public relations campaign. They rallied the troops at the Software Developers Conference. They made workarounds for customers. It was a huge financial hit for them, but they got it done. And another successful implementation by Steve Jobs, one of my business heroes. I'd like to talk about a few changes gone wrong and the consequences for those changes gone wrong. We'll see some huge write-offs, protracted court battles, productivity loss, and even, unfortunately, if change goes wrong, you have the potential risk to go out of business. It happens a lot more than you may think. We'll go through and start talking about Avon. So Avon products, I'm sure you're aware of, is in the health and beauty industry. They had a radical change, which is they changed a financial reporting, and they wanted to streamline their financials for their salespeople, and they wanted to be able to empower them to do in-home orders instead of the traditional stuff. They would take the orders on paper and go and email it or mail it in, really. So they were trying to actually provide some innovation. Unfortunately, they went with an ERP vendor, and I don't think there was any issues with the ERP vendor except that they didn't really do the due diligence. The outcome ultimately was a $125 million write-down. Also, they had significant workforce numbers leave the organization because the order changes and the implementation of it was so poor, they didn't do the right amount of end user testing and regression testing. If they would have spent time on some of these tools and even other tools, they would have found this out fairly readily, but they didn't. This is as bad as it gets. There's other disasters that are even worse, but this one is about as bad as it gets. They were completely out of touch with their sales force, from leadership to communication to process. What is more telling is the ERP vendor made this statement: software was working as designed despite any issues with implementation of the project. That is a catastrophic, poor communication to the public. There should have been ownership on both sides. Again, $25 million write-down. I don't know how that affected them long term. I don't know what their global revenues are for that, but that is, it's not good. They are still in business, by the way. Waste management. They're in the industry. They're in the sanitation industry. Again, another ERP. By the way, ERP implementations are riddled with failures. Just go look at, just do a Google search, and you'll find a comical high number of failed ERP implementations. They were seeking some innovation. They had desire to streamline their financials and revenue management across all divisions. They were sold, they were marketed to, the outcome, by the way, was a protracted court battle. It's been settled, but it's privately settled. It was taken out of the court and put into mediation. The key tools I've identified were the leadership and the process. In defense of waste management, they were definitely deceived by the vendor, and they had been given some phony mock-ups of what the vendor said that they could do when they actually couldn't do. Not a very good outcome. But leadership, had they done some I put this a little bit on leadership because they could have actually done some market tests or some side tests, or run in dual run the process in dual in side by side. They chose not to do that for cost reasons, and they had a very large write-down. Congo gummy, which is probably the biggest lesson learned that I've done in all my case studies. They're in a very stable business, Buddhist temple construction. They've started literally over 1,400 years ago in 578 AD. They've had 50 different leaders from all from the same family. It's very traditional in Japan to be for a son-in-law to take the wife's name in very prominent families. It was very conservative. It's been in business for 1,400 years. The change type, unfortunately, was an unplanned change. It was some government changes and some economical changes, and they were doing some risk avoidance by taking some of the money and profit they had and putting it into assets that went down tremendously in value, and they weren't able to service the debt. Unfortunately, they had to liquidate, and their assets were acquired by another company. The good news is they are still running as a subsidiary to another large company. Lesson learned here is no business in any industry is completely safe. You have to be vigilant. You have to go through and do the right thing all the time, because you are vulnerable at any time for any of these changes to affect your business in a negative way. Rarely, sometimes in a positive way, but more likely a negative way. In summary, keys to success, using the tools, leadership, and again the subset of leadership, communication, and process. You stand to gain some, you can lesser the resistance to change. You can get operational efficiencies from faster change. And if you get really good at this, you can really narrow the time to implement and reap all the benefits that comes with quicker to market, getting your cost savings amplified sooner. So I'm going to switch over to questions and answers time. So Yaslin, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, Michael, we have a question here. It is, I see that 2 of the failed change projects involved ERP deployments. How would you ensure this does not happen via the change tools?
Well, I would follow them first. Again, ERP is, it's definitely a radical change, and it's something that we see a lot, that ERP changes, because it affects the accounting system, can affect sales. You definitely got to break down the resistance to change. You got to validate that things are working right. You got to get the buy-in from you definitely have to get the buy-in from your subordinates. You got to get the buy-in from your customers. You got to do some testing, regression testing. You really got to be open and honest about the process, and really clearly define your goals, and make sure it gets vetted across all levels and in all departments that it's affecting. It's not a terrible thing to actually do a side-by-side comparison if you truly think that this could negatively affect your business, which, again, ERPs, you can go out of business if you do a bad ERP deployment. Happens literally all the time. ERP is can be your accounting package, can be your single source for your customer. There's a lot of problems there. But if you follow those tools, truly follow those tools, your leadership is driving everything down the communication and process, you will mitigate that risk. Any additional questions, Deslin?
Thank you, Michael. Yes, there's one more question here. You mentioned mergers and acquisitions as a change. Can you give more details?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to work at a company that had mergers and acquisitions down to a T. They would go through dozens in a year. I think I mentioned it slightly. Mergers and acquisitions is certainly a change, but it has subcomponents that are equally changes. Like I just said, I just got done talking about ERP changes. Guess what? Mergers and acquisitions usually have ERP changes. Usually. You're going to be using somebody else's financial package, or somebody else is going to be using yours. So there's potential risk there. You have to treat all of those changes individually and then roll them up as part of the whole. Again, utilizing the tools. Communication is absolutely critical. Leadership is absolutely critical. Process, again, is critical. Going through and actually treating that mergers and acquisition as multiple changes is most likely going to get you where you need to be sooner than later. So, anything? Do you have any more questions for me?
No, it looks like that's all of our questions. And so thank you, Michael, and to all of our participants for joining us today. Please watch for our follow-up email with the replay link along with a copy of this presentation. And please take a moment to complete our brief exit survey. And on behalf of Michael and the Auxis team, we thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.